So we'll quickly move into the next panel. Crafting the future, technology, ethics, and digital transition. We've been hearing bits of this across all the various panels. We are living it in every sort of element of our life. And obviously, crafts cannot be ignored. As far as technology is concerned, it is bound to impinge if we allow it to impinge, or it's bound to inspire if we allow it to inspire. Before I start my opening, I would like to invite the three panelists to come up on stage and join me. So, Dr. Zhu, you will have to come up on stage again, please. As I mentioned, he is the president of the China Arts and Crafts Association and also the chairman of the China Machinery Industry Federation. He's a double PhD and a visiting professor. When we talk of technology, we obviously have to have China in there. So we are so happy that you are here. My second panelist is Mr. Sahel Aliari. He's an architect and an artist, an interesting combination. He's from Jordan and founder of the architectural firm, which bears his name. He studied architecture and fine arts at the Rhode Island School of Design, completed a master's of architecture in urban design at Harvard University, and pursued postgraduate work at the University of Venice, where he also taught. He has, in his own field, been marrying tradition and modernity and technology in many ways, and we thought that it would be an interesting experience to learn from some other creative industries and how they have managed to sort of keep a pace with the movement in technology. Our third panelist is Abhishek Kumar from India. He's a social media and technology professional, has worked and been associated with Google, Microsoft, and many other organizations. And again, when we're talking about technology, we can't keep all these companies away from us. And that's why, Abhishek, we are relying on you to educate us on what is technology and what is it that it can do for craft. Without further ado, let me just give a little opening, because we all have different understandings of technology. And we all have different understandings of how technology is sort of weaving itself with craft. And I thought that it would be nice to be able to put that in a little bit of a perspective. So how do crafts enter the digital future without losing their soul? And that is really what I felt is the big question before us. We want to embrace technology, we want to embrace the future, but at the same time, we don't want to lose our soul. Technology today is often spoken about as inevitable. AI will expand, platforms will scale, digitization will accelerate. But crafts remind us of one essential truth. Technology is never neutral in craft. Craft is not just output. It is lineage. It is tacit knowledge carried on by hands. It is memory, identity, and community consent embedded in process, as we discussed in the earlier panel today. So the real issue before us is not whether crafts should engage with technology, because I think that is reasonably inevitable, but on whose terms, with what safeguards, and for whose benefit. And this, I think, is a question that we should all be asking ourselves. For centuries, craft has been framed primarily as heritage, something to preserve. And as we saw in some of the panels yesterday, that very notion is being questioned, that is it something to preserve or something that should evolve. Today, the definition is expanding. Craft is now a driver of innovation, a generator of livelihoods, and a central pillar of the creative economy approaching $1 trillion global market. Consumers across the world are seeking meaning, authenticity, and responsibility, and they are willing to pay for it. But this carries, but this shift also carries risk. The challenge is ensuring that artisans are not reduced to content providers while platforms, algorithms, and intermediaries capture the value. The panel is about agency, heritage that actively shapes contemporary markets rather than being extracted by them. You know, while working on this subject, I learned a new word. And maybe for many of you it is a familiar word, but it was definitely a new word for me. Dr. Koshi, I'm sure you know this word. Ersatz. And ersatz, for those of you like me who may not have heard of it before, is a very relevant word when it comes to technology and craft. It basically means cheap imitation. You know, so the question really is, should technology be seen as an enabler and not as something that creates cheap imitations? Now, across regions, we see technology supporting craft in many powerful ways. Digital documentation, preserving fragile techniques and oral histories, CAD tools enabling experimentation and reducing waste, e-commerce opening global markets for rural artisans, blockchain supporting authenticity and traceability, and AI material science extending technical possibilities. One of the examples was shared by Sumesh yesterday in terms of the steel wire and how it opens up distinct possibilities. And there are some other examples which I thought I would quickly share with you so that when we talk about technology, we see what all it is really encompassing. There is, in India, traditional weaving techniques are being reimagined through 3D weaving software and smart looms. In Mexico, whatever it's called, artisans are not only reviving natural dyes, but also combining them with digital color mapping tools. And this enables them to reach out to European and other markets and truly define what is the shade that they're looking for. So blue is no longer blue. In West Africa, the iconic Kenti motifs of Ghana are being digitized, appearing in contemporary fashion, digital art, and even NFT-based cultural platforms. In Europe, ceramists are using AI and 3D printing to extend centuries-old porcelain traditions. In Japan, some lacquerware workshops are experimenting with nanotechnology for durability. Japanese nanotechnology in lacquerware enhances not just durability, but incorporates various advanced techniques that enables the product to be much more enduring and not lose color and so on and so forth. And in Scandinavia, they're even sort of having technology that is sensitive to the environment, and the color changes depending on the temperature rising, temperature falling, and so on and so forth. So there are many such examples. And really, it is really all this that technology today is embracing. But there are, But this panel brings, three interesting forces that are shaping this digital transformation, which is visibility versus vulnerability. Unprecedented reach brings exposure to copying, appropriation, loss of control. Design circulates faster than consent. Innovation versus extraction. Technology enables collaboration, but also cultural extraction, heritage mimed for value without reciprocity. And of course, there is the question of excess versus control. And at the very center of this debate is really the question of ethics. Consent. Who gives permission for digitization? Attribution. Who controls future use of craft technology? Fair compensation. Who benefits economically from this digital transition? And of course, cultural accountability. Who bears risk if something goes wrong? Today, even more important is really the issue of governance, because good intentions are not enough. There have to be rules, regulations, etc., in place to enable these these ethical questions to be addressed. And accessibility, of course, is the key, because again, if we're talking about technology, then we're also talking about some people gaining more than others. So how do we make it, technology and the benefits and the fruits of technology accessible to a wider section of people? We have three complementary perspectives on this panel, which is what will hopefully make the panel interesting. Dr. Zhu will perhaps offer institutional and policy-driven perspectives on deploying technology at scale for documentation, protection, and dissemination, while managing authenticity. Mr. Sahil Alihari brings an applied practitioner's lens, working at the intersection of design, storytelling, entrepreneurship, and market engagement rooted in tradition. And Mr. Abhishek Kumar contributes a digital entrepreneurship perspective, translating platforms, algorithms, and data-driven growth into practical, artisan-centered strategies. Technology should be seen as a steward and not a substitute. It must support transmission, it must help amplify voices, it must enhance visibility, and of course strengthen communities. And why this panel really matters beyond this room is because these discussions inform policy, influence institutional practice, and shape how future technologies engage with living heritage. And if crafts are to thrive in a digital world, that future must be governed with intention, not just left entirely to market forces or algorithms. So with that, I would like to quickly move into our panel and begin by putting them on the spot. So, Dr. Zhu, I would like to start with you, if I may. And China has, of course, invested heavily in digitizing, scaling traditional crafts, as we see, through institutional platforms in terms of outreach as well as other means. Can you share with us that what is really being done and how do you guard against ensuring authenticity?
So, thanks for the moderator giving me the topics.
You're free to make an opening statement before coming to my question.
Okay. Just hear about the last the panel, the panelist. So got a lot of the information. I think it's almost a lesson, but I don't know how can I to answer your question is correct or not. So, but for China, I understand the Chinese the situations. I just want to the chance to introduce them Chinese the situations about. So our the discussion the panel is about the digital the transitions and the artificial intelligence is meaningful. It's a very impact of our industries. I am the president of the Chinese Art Works Associations. I always in a lot of chance to talk to our artisans and so the artisans, the people, which try to learn more, try to catch up now the situations, the society, the big change. So I'm very glad to see the World Crafts Council so made for the topic for our forum. So before I answer the questions, I want to introduce the Chinese artworks, the situations. So the Chinese character of the Chinese arts and the So some of the firstly, they have a long history. We know so since over the 2,000 years. So and the secondly, they have widely distributed through the China over so the 9.6 million square kilometers and covering the 34 provinces. And thirdly, there are the widely varied arts and crafts in China, divided into the 11 major character categories and 65 middle sized categories. And also the totally the 1,881 the sub-categories. So the fourth, the characteristic is historically it has the significant impact on the Chinese economy. So before we haven't any industries except the artworks like commodities and the daily necessities. So artworks all come from the Chinese arts and the crafts. So at that time, so we called them the craftsmen and the artisans. So in the past, so there are many peoples engaged in the industry in China. However, after the 1950s, the craftsmen and the artisans gradually disappeared. We collectively refer to them as the artisans or arts and crafts workers. It depends on the method of the work. So what the current scale of the contribution of this industry, so the direct production value of arts and the crafts is 150 billion US dollars. Total of them together is 200 billion US dollars. So the number of the people engaged in this industry is about 13 million. And also we put them together, people upstream and downstream industries, nearly 200 million. So it's a difference with other countries. Additional characteristic is that there are the masters artisans. We have both China national masters and province masters. Of Chinese masters, we have the 400. We evaluate 640 peoples. Now we still have the 400. For the evaluate the more than the 7,000 people. So for the province, the masters. Okay. So the masters who have their own studios, students, and factories. So now the digital transition and the AI intelligence manufacture have begun to enter the China arts and the crafts industries. So example, we have, so China has applied this new modern technology to our data and historical preservations. So the arts and the crafts industries in China has reached the content. So now for my associations, we have to start compiling the China arts and the crafts encyclopedia throughout the country. We took too long? Maybe
No, it's fine.
It's fine?
Yeah.
Not finished yet. Continue, huh? Or let's so other people.
Okay, we can move on and then come back to you.
Yeah, we come back.
So, the microphone you can. Your opening remarks, please, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the organizers of this event. Of course, I am an architect, and in my practice, craft is something that permeates the practice, and not in only one kind of discipline, but in several disciplines. My particular interest in architecture is one that allows this idea of human temperament kind of manifest itself in the production of space and architecture. So when we speak of technology and softwares, yes, we use them, but up to a certain extent. But the actual crafting of a building is typically, in my practice, finished by artisans. And we have been experimenting a lot with the kind of taking one kind of, for example, a master mason, but dealing with another material. So in my practice, different artisans do things they're not meant to do. And this is an experimental part of the projects we do. However, to address really the topic that we have here, I think what is important is to understand craft as something that is engaged with multiple forces and that had started traditionally, of course, and if you look at it in this kind of perennial philosophy, that it always tried to capture something, some kind of essential truth, and to express itself culturally and collectively. And therefore, there's this idea of anonymity. There is, if you look at, for example, Islamic art, it is very, very rare that we see kind of names that appear. The characters of, and this idea of the persona or authorship is always folded into these objects because they come from really a much more spiritual kind of position than what we have today, which is the kind of the culture of celebrity. And so when we talk about craft, I always look at that and try to capture that and encapsulate it in the work we do in a contemporary way. Now, another thing I would like to talk about is there has been a discussion excuse me, over and over that I've heard in other panels about this idea of how to make craft sort of a contemporary thing. And the question maybe has to be reframed is how to kind of reinvigorate the contemporary with craft, because the previous panel, and I completely agree, we live in this sort of desert of sameness, right, and of cultural dilution, where people no longer express their identities, but the identities of imported figures and characters and forces as well. So there is all of this sort of mess, and then in this mess we have to think of what technology is doing. And what technology is doing right now is creating a further flattening of crafts. And I think this is where this awareness, where we can come up with something promising, where we can use technology in a way to...
Just to react to that, so how do you see that people can address that?
I think through education. I think through education is the only hope, really, because when you look at what students are being taught in the universities, and I talk about architecture, and they only know about the last decade of architectural production, and limited to a certain geography, and always concentrated on modernity. And, when some students come and train in my office, the first thing I give them is the plans of El-Karnak in Egypt, and I tell them copy it, right? And first they have this glazed look, that's a solid example, and then once they start to kind of try to reproduce the proportional systems that are embedded in the floor plan, and here this is another type of craft, right? And once they try to reproduce that, they get an aha moment. And then later on, a year or two after, and when I see the work, I see it, but distilled and done in a completely different way. And that's, I think, this is the idea exactly of transmission that we were talking about. It's not form, but it's the philosophy, it's the essences of things, rather.
The soul.
Yeah, the soul.
Abhishek, would you like to give us your views on this subject and from your perspective?
Thank you so much. My discussion would be, hovering around digital, digital, and digital. How we can, use this aspect of the business to help grow more, craft and making, how we can record or capture the originality, document it without losing the originality and preserve it for the further generation. So what is happening in today's current scenario that anybody and everybody is taking some other craft and infusing some of his or her thought and AI designs into that. And to preserve that, there is a technology called blockchain, which has many facets like time stamping and so on. So once, let's suppose sadhu weaving. So example of sadhu weaving, if we, use blockchain and capture the original weaving pattern with the the pattern, the technique, and everything. So it is time stamped, and that passes on further to the next generation without any dilution. So my discussion would be hovering around that. Thank you.
Okay, coming back to you,
My
Dr.
turn,
Zhu.
huh?
Yeah, your turn. So,
Let me continually to introduce the Chinese encyclopedias. Encyclopedias, every country has, I think so. But I just want to address the digitalizations, and so the AI is very important and impact the industries. It's very huge, the work, because the Chinese arts and the crafts encyclopedias has been since the launched compilations. The work is divided more than 200 volumes, and in the 34 province in China. Totally is 60 million words. So not only the words, because we have to buy the digital and some of the part of the AI to work. The fourth one is to protect the inherit the resources and art and the crafts. So especially the endangered the technologies by using the high definition, the images and the videos, and the scan and the establish the limbo, the digital archive systems. So the second, so we can supply to the school and the researchers and the students. For some people as a reference to to use the information. The third is to enhance the services of the public, the culture, and especially the open digital resources. It's very important. The fourth, so easy to take to travel. Like I come to the Kuwait, I cannot bring the 200 books for the chairman said. I can give him a disk and the chips, so everything. So it's not easy for us. Many technology. So like the blockchain, and so we need to traceable, and also the trustees of the peoples. The money is problem for the Chinese government. So invest some money, but it's not enough. So we have to fundraise, form the societies, our membership, and also branch the association in the whole the countries. I just want to introduce how with the protections, so the keep our by the digitalizations. So for the work, I hope it's useful for our friends, and also I want to communicate so our experience, and also we work maybe not only for the countries, the whole world encyclopedias. We have to work by the new technology.
So there's an interesting point you make, Dr. Zhu, which is that often people fear, and I had that in my opening remarks, that technology and digitization will create a greater divide between the digital have-nots and the digital haves. But the interesting point that you make is that actually it is a great equalizer, because it enables access to a larger number of people, and it's more democratizing than not having it at all. Abhishek, do you agree with that? Yeah.
Yesterday, in yesterday's panel, there was a discussion about livelihood and everything. And at the end of the day, we need money to, survive and do anything, even to educate our children food. So whatever craft, whatever country, they need money, end of the day. Now the question comes, can the digitization save the originality? And while saving that, can they, populate the, reach?
Make it more accessible.
Make it more accessible. So that's where blockchain comes into the picture. Blockchain preserves and safeguards the originality, and the person gets the kind of authenticity certificate that who's the person who made this, how much time it took, what is the process, was this ever sold to somebody else, the whole lineage basically. So the person who gets all this details, the person would appreciate and pay more. So end of the day, the whole ecosystem grows. So of course, that supports.
So the point is that if it becomes more accessible to people, now knowledge can be transmitted. How can technology be used to transmit skill?
See, skill can be transmitted only by practice. Like I gave the example of sadhu weaving, right? Similarly, in India, we have a craft called camel belt braiding. There's only one person who's practicing that. He's from NID, Errol Pyers Nelson. We had a project for that. We struggled for months and months to get people to, practice that. One person cannot travel across the globe. So let's assume we, document that practice, that how much time, what material he uses, the quality of material, then what the weaving technique is, what technique he uses to make, suppose, a belt, or he has a seamless garment in which there is no cut and sew. So these kind of things can be, documented using 4-dimensional sort of thing and be preserved in blockchain. So that's like forever and can be accessed from any part of the world. Suppose 10,000 people sees that, probably 10 would practice. Out of 10, 2 or 3 or maybe all 10 of them becomes a master. Then that populates. So yes, marriage of both is very much needed.
There's a very interesting point you made, Sahil, and I want to sort of probe on that a little more with your permission, which is that rather than contemporizing crafts, it is important to put craft into contemporary designs and products. That's a very interesting way to look at it, because we always think, okay, how do we make crafts more contemporary? Instead of that, we should look at how do we make more contemporary things craft-like, Can you give some examples?
Exactly, but I'd like to address what they said before. I completely agree that digital technology is essential for documentation, and most likely AI will be able to help sort of reconstruct certain lost techniques and kind of solve certain things that have to do with material science and so on. I do believe that, and we spoke about this last night. However, what really concerns me is the content. What content are we providing, and will it really be kind of accessible to all, right? I mean, this is, you know, in wishful thinking, that would happen. So I just wanted to raise that question, and maybe we can address that later. But to address what you were saying, I think the contemporary, the whole idea of the contemporary culture, it's really such a malaise, in my opinion, that that everything has to be kind of watered down into this contemporary feel. And by doing so, basically, what happens is that there are centuries of knowledge and of history of making that become completely flattened to be able to kind of become more trendy and fashionable and accessible to the public. I think if you had kind of a better awareness of where crafts come from and what do they actually mean, and what are the techniques, and so on, and how that can be sort of a force that actually revitalizes contemporary design. That might be kind of like the savior of this idea of sameness that you see everywhere. And I don't mean only kind of taking cultural forms and applying them like wallpaper onto things, onto contemporary things. I find that really quite terrible, in my opinion. I think it's really about the essence of things, the technique, the quality. How do you achieve quality that is not that doesn't look as if it's done by a CNC machine, let's say.
Right. Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? And how do you get colors or glazes, for example, that are, they don't look like color by numbers? So in education, I think there is a great possibility of understanding, let's say, what is the philosophy of Japanese color combinations? What is the philosophy of Chinese traditional glazing, which involve a lot of grinding and material collection and all of that. So I think this is where contemporary culture can benefit from craft and not the other way around.
Yeah, so instead of, as you said, flattening and simplifying craft, let us look at other forms of visual manifestations which can be enriched with craft. I think that's an important. And coming back to you, Dr. Zhu, in China, everything happens to scale, right? I mean, you do a lot of things in big ways. So what are some of the future plans that you would have on how to integrate technology with craft? Are there any thinking in this direction, or are there certain steps being taken in this direction?
So one of the important things, so the digitalizations, the technology and technology used to our producings. For now, in China, there is the city is Quanzhou, some of the county. So like the stone cutting, and traveling to the production traveling to the whole world. So now the stone, initially the produced by the cutting machine, the machine tools, the cutting. So now it's by the rubbers and rubbed hand. And then for the finished work by the masters. So the rubbers cannot replace the masters now, because there's the works. So there is the masters, the ideas. So and even is the core parts, and the technique, the parts, only by the people. But so in the futures, probably the AI, they can learn the 100 times, 1,000 times. Probably they can copy the people's, the masters, the ideas. So the first way, the design So the productions will have to use the modern technology. But the second, so the IP rights, intellectual property the rights, so the ownership rights also is by protection by the law and by the cultures is very important. So now it's WCC is very important because the people's only for the masters or only the one the factories one, so the artisans they protect themselves. It's not easy for the WCC to the organizations across the countries to protect. So by the arbitrations or by the lawsuit. So in China also it's the same. So now we have the functions for our associations. So the first we have a lot of the friends is the Chinese aircraftsmen. They want to go other cities, other countries. I can introduce them to there. So, oh, I know the Saad. You want to go to the Kuwait? So I can introduce some of the peoples to you, easy. And the second, so we have the knowledge, and we have a lot of the people's the networks for the protection them by law and arbitrations by some of the ICC China and the whole the ICC the networks. So that means we work together. So cooperation is very important. I still have one word I want to say, but save the time.
So almost in every other field also where technology is impinging, we are having issues of governance, we're having issues of ethics, we are having issues of how it should be managed and monitored. And I think crafts will be no different from that going forward. I think we are just at the beginning of what is going to be happening. Marcus, I'm going to do a little thing different, and I'm going to actually ask a question from the audience rather than the audience asking us a question. We want to use your knowledge, talk about how this whole the debate of ethics and IP, etc., and how within the context of crafts and technology, how do you see it? If you can, 2 minutes, share some thoughts with us.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Now, this is obviously not an easy question. And what I can say is that we are still at the very start of considering these particular aspects of new technologies. You mentioning ethics, in particular. And I think what the elephant in the room here is the question, with all these new AI technologies, do they, and if yes, to what extent will they replace the human being? What we have been observing so far is that in our member states, when it comes to questions of intellectual property, where a lot of what is happening is still human-centric, thinking of the author in the area of copyright, for example. And you can imagine in the area of craft, it's the craft person, the craftsman or the craft lady, that this, for the near future, will not change. Our current position is that our intellectual property remains human-centric. And what we see in our member states, in an area where the question has actually been considered even by courts of law, is the area of patents, where in practically all countries, in order to grant a patent to an invention, the patent application has to name the inventor. And there has been a case, has been tried, that the named inventor was not a human, but a machine. And so far, universally, patents have been refused. The grant of patents has been refused to machines. And we do see similar tendencies in the area of copyright, for example, where the author is a human person. And although there is, a plethora of AI-generated content nowadays, So there's a big debate going on in that area, and I only can speak obviously for intellectual property. But we see that in a larger context also in the area of governance and administration. And again, to make the connection to intellectual property, on the one hand, you have the creator, the author, the inventor. But on the other hand, very often you have the administration that has to make a decision whether or not, for example, an invention merits a patent. Now the question is who's making that decision? And again, for the time being, the final decision, and it has been confirmed by all of the patent office of member states, the final decision is human, although it is being assisted nowadays by all forms of technological means. So in other words, to carry out a research, for example, or to determine whether a particular invention is new, has already been published before, or is inventive, is computer assisted. But the final decision, yes or no, is still human-centric. So, but this is, I mean, I'm talking about the situation early 2026, right? This is a rapid development, and I think it goes far beyond the area of intellectual property. We see that in all areas of life.
Absolutely.
Medicine, health, general administration, etc. And we will probably need to see what's coming there.
I think with many such debates with technology these days, I'm afraid we probably have more questions than we have answers at this stage in the evolution of technology. But I think one thing is very clear, and I think many of the panelists also agreed on that, basically technology should really be there to serve craft and not reshape craft. And we should look at how we can reshape other things in the image of craft, as it were. Also, digital tools, like you mentioned, can extend visibility, markets, and transmission, making them much more sort of holistic and democratized. But only when guided by ethics, consent, and cultural accountability. I think these are important governing forces that should guide whatever policy and governance tools that are created. And ownership must remain with the artisans and not be transmitted to a machine, as you rightly pointed out, and with the communities where these crafts originate. Scale must not erode authenticity, and I think China is a good example of trying to safeguard against that. And institutions must actively govern digital transition and not leave it to the platforms and market forces alone to govern those, because that is likely to distort the whole scenario. Technology should strengthen embodied skills through transmission of knowledge and digitization, and cultural dignity should remain, and none of this should be replaced by machines. So a collective commitment, therefore, should be to ensure that digital transformation becomes a steward of living heritage and not a force of extraction and exploitation. So with that, I would like to bring this panel to a close and thank my panelists for giving us a lot of interesting information and food for thought. Thank you so much.